separate members' bills, which weren't the government's policy, on things like banning smartphones in schools, as well as withdrawing the whip from a good Labour MP speaking up for his farmers, only for the government to later adopt his position. That's why we need a proper contest where all candidates can put their best foot forward. It's got to be a battle of ideas so that whoever wins comes out stronger for it. Because when Labour loses, the country loses. And the stakes are higher than ever. Because for the first time in Labour's history, our biggest opponents aren't the Conservatives, but Nigel Farage and Reform. If last week's results weren't bad enough, I ask you to cast your mind back 10 years, when we lost just one vote on one day to Farage. The result was the catastrophe of Brexit and the consequences that followed. One vote, one day. Imagine the consequences of losing a general election to that man. And unless we change course, that is where we are heading. So it is time for us to step up, to show that Labour is capable of delivering the change that people are crying out for, to show that politics can be a force for good, to show that Britain is still capable of doing big things, to unite our movement and defeat reform. That is our responsibility now. And what a day for us to have gathered. Today, as Rosie said, Tommy Robinson and his followers are marching through the streets of our capital city. The last time he did, ministers were sent out by Number 10 with a media script to explain the march rather than condemn it. What we've experienced in our country in recent months is a type of racism that we haven't seen on our streets since the 1970s and 1980s. Our country's flags, flown from lampposts and flyovers, not as a symbol of national pride, but as a symbol of division. A message that those flags belong to people who look like me and not people who look like our Deputy Prime Minister, our Home Secretary, or our Mayor of London. We've seen mosques set on fire and vandalised, Muslim women harassed because of what they wear, diminishing our country and forgetting our history. That the fight for Britain's liberty was also a fight against fascism, waged by people from these islands alongside the largest volunteer army in the world, made up of Muslims, Hindus and Sikhs from India, and troops from across the entire of the modern Commonwealth. There are no second-class citizens in this country, black or white, rich or poor, gay or straight, religious or atheist, man or woman. That flag belongs to all of us, not just some of us. We've also seen Jewish people murdered and attacked in their shawls and on our streets. Kids in my constituency trying to hide their school uniforms and Stars of David because they fear being abused or attacked just for being Jews. Globalise the Intifada in deeds, not just words. Racism, on the march, shocking, shameful, and a stain on this nation's conscience and reputation. Nigel Farage and Reform seek to exploit division and hatred to benefit from it at the ballot box. And when it comes to anti-Semitism on the left, the Green Party choose to look the other way because their party is now riddled with that which we expelled. So this is our fight. This has always been Labour's fight. Not just to confront the forces of racism, discrimination and hatred, but to build a path to a better and brighter future for everyone, where everyone has got a stake in this country and everyone has the opportunity and security they need, not just to survive, but to thrive. This country has been through so much. in the last 20 years. The financial crash, austerity, Brexit, Liz Truss, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and now the war in Iran. All of this has taken its toll. Too many people work harder but feel they're getting nowhere. Too many communities see progress that passes them by. Too many feel that Britain is in decline. They feel it in their pay packets that no longer stretch to the end of the month. They feel it in public services they rely on but no longer trust. They work harder yet feel less secure. They contribute but do not feel valued. They obey the rules but can see when others don't do the same. The richest 10% hold 57% of total wealth. The bottom 50% hold just 4%. 60% of private wealth is inherited rather than created. A nurse with a student loan sees a bigger share of their income disappearing in tax than a landlord does on rising property values. The result is fertile ground for the politics of resentment, for the promise that the nation can be made great again by retreating from the world, closing borders and finding scapegoats. We see it in the rise of self-confident racism, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. But decline is not inevitable. Britain has extraordinary strengths, world-class science, deep capital markets, world-renowned culture, strong institutions, and a people rich in talent. But we are failing to turn those strengths into rising prosperity for everyone. The biggest fear I have about Britain today is that sense of cynicism that's in the air, the sense that things won't get better. And I fear that, unchecked, that cynicism risks sliding into fatalism, a conviction that things can't get better. Why does this sense of the inevitability of decline exist? Why has a belief in progress faltered? First, we are isolated in a dangerous world dominated by an unpredictable superpower in the USA, a rising superpower in China, and a failed superpower in Russia. Second, we face an economy that is stagnant but being disrupted by technology and AI that we no longer feel control over. Third, our public discourse online is a cesspit of misinformation and extremism, where reasoned debate feels impossible and fear is weaponized by our enemies. Today's politics must deal with the immediate issues that concern voters: affordability, small boats, the NHS. But we also need it to rise to the big issues that define our age. We need a bigger politics. Let's embrace diversity of thought and competition for ideas as a strength. We won't find radical solutions by ignoring ideas in favour of just problem solving, as though government is the same as management consultancy, or if we believe that one person or one faction has a monopoly on ideas and wisdom. Nor will they come from traditional ways of governing that refuse to take risks, work in the open, or experiment. But at the core are three big, important choices we have to make as a country that can help us regain our sense of progress. First, leaving the European Union was a catastrophic mistake. The Vote Leave campaign deluded itself into thinking that the UK could forge a global free trade nirvana, as though we still had the East India Company at our disposal. They were totally blind to the zero-sum world the extreme right and their fellow travellers were creating, a dog-eat-dog world of dictators and oligarchs, where middle powers going it alone is a fantasy. It's left us less wealthy, less powerful, and less in control than at any point before the Industrial Revolution. We can no longer afford to be silent about it. We must remake the argument. In 2026, the British people increasingly see that in a dangerous world we must club together, both to rebuild our economy and trade and improve our defence against the shared threats from Russian aggression and the retreat of America first. The biggest economic opportunity we have is on our doorstep. We need a new special relationship with the EU because Britain's future lies with Europe and one day, back in the European Union. Second, a continuity between our current government and the new Labour government is a reluctance to ask the question, what type of capitalism do we want? We've tended to assume that we're simply the recipients of change inflicted on us by technology or economic headwinds, rather than realising that it is our rules, our institutions, our alliances that shape the kind of economy we have. This is an argument for a Britain that grows again and grows together, not just growth that shows up in spreadsheets in Whitehall or stock prices in the city. We need growth that people can feel in their wages, in their high streets, in the chances their kids have in life. Social democracy only works when the economy is growing. You cannot build world-class public services or raise living standards by managing decline. So Labour must be unapologetic about wealth creation, backing the builders, the innovators, the entrepreneurs, and the workers who drive prosperity. That means reindustrialising Britain, spreading opportunity beyond London and the South East, backing industries from clean energy to life sciences and advanced manufacturing, and taking on the vested interests and monopolies holding our country back. We should be a magnet for global talent and investment, open to the best ideas and the brightest people, with the confidence to trade, compete, and win. Third, we treat the destruction of shared truth, the atomization of audiences, the algorithmic amplification of the worst of us, as if it were a force of nature. It isn't. We've chosen to hand the pen to tech moguls in Silicon Valley to write our future for us. It is time to take the pen back from the tech broligarchs. In the 1920s, a previous generation, one or two of them here, looked at a new communications technology, the radio, and they made a choice that defined British public life for a century. They created the BBC. It was not an obvious choice. The American path was available and actually seemed more modern. The choice to build a public institution, paid for collectively, accountable, with a mission rather than a market, took political bravery. It required taking on the vested interests of the day, which were considerable. We need that scale of imagination again. What is the BBC-shaped intervention for the era of platforms? What would it mean to build, not just regulate? What public infrastructure for information, for civic discourse, for trust would we be proud to hand on to our children? These are some of the questions I want us to start asking, debating, and discussing. We'll regain our sense of progress through that shared conversation and a bigger politics. If this country is going to weather yet another storm, we need to give people hope that what we're doing, the choices we're making, are in pursuit of something better at the end of it all. Markets are powerful. Enterprise matters. Wealth creation is essential. But left to themselves, markets do not guarantee dignity, security, or fairness. They generate prosperity, but they also breed inequality, insecurity, and concentrations of power that can leave whole communities behind. The job of government is not to stand aside and hope for the best. It is to shape the market so that power, wealth, and opportunity are in the hands of the many, not just the privileged few. That is the social democratic tradition, which begins with a really simple proposition. Together we achieve more than we achieve alone. At its best, our tradition is revisionist, intellectually curious, always willing to learn, to adapt, and to govern the world as it is without surrendering the values that tell us how the world ought to be. We measure our success in outcomes, not just good intentions. Our tradition says that your chances in life should not be determined by the postcode you're born into, the wealth of your parents, or the school you happen to attend. It says that freedom means more than the absence of restraint. You're not truly free if you're priced out of good health, if your wages do not cover the bills, if your housing is insecure, or if your children inherit fewer opportunities than you had. That's why social democrats built the great institutions of modern Britain, the welfare state, council housing, comprehensive education, and above all, our National Health Service. Not as acts of charity, but as expressions of citizenship. The idea that certain guarantees, healthcare, education, security in old age, should belong to everyone because everyone matters equally. And that principle remains as relevant now as it was in 1945. I came into politics to make sure that kids from working class backgrounds like mine have the same choices and chances, security and opportunity as those from the most privileged backgrounds. For the first time in our country's modern history, it is now the case that the next generation face prospects that are poorer than the last. That is what I am determined to change. I find it so profoundly shocking. I see it in my own constituency, in the lives of the kids growing up in the same sort of poverty I grew up in back in the 1980s. The tragedy is that on so many levels it's worse for them now than it was for me. The council flat I wanted to escape is now something children aspire to. They don't have the security of a council flat. They're living in bed and breakfast and temporary accommodation. They don't have the stability of a great state education to set them up for life like I had, because as they're moved from pillar to post, they're often moved from school to school, so no chance for their teachers to work their magic. Their parents don't have the support of an extended family network like my mum had to help with childcare or to make up the shortfall from the weekly shop, because they're often moved across towns and cities or even between towns and cities, breaking families apart. It doesn't have to be this way. None of this has to be this way. The council estate where I grew up was built out of a bomb site because in 1945, Clement Attlee's government said that even in the aftermath of the Second World War, Britain was still capable of doing big things. We still can. Each generation used to leave this country better for the next. We still can. We used to have a health service that was the envy of the world. We still can. We used to believe that everyone deserved a home of their own. We still can. We used to make the argument that Britain's future lies in Europe. We still can. This country used to punch above its weight in the world, and we still can. There are around 1,000 days or so to go until the next general election. One of my great political heroes, the former Prime Minister of Australia, Paul Keating, once told me his mantra, never waste a minute. There is no time to waste. The future is not yet written. It is ours to build. So let's be motivated by the scale of the challenge we face, not weighed down by it. We have a responsibility to be the change that people want to see, to show that politics can be a force for good again, to prove that Britain's best days lie ahead, to unite progressives and smash reform, and we still can. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to start with 2 media questions and then come to the audience. So we're going to start with John Craig at Sky News.
Thank you, John Craig, Sky News. Mr. Streeting, you've just called for a proper contest for the Labour leadership, and you called on Labour to step up. Are you going to step up and contest the Labour leadership? End the suspense now, please.
John, we need a proper contest with the best candidates on the field, and I'll be standing.
Thank you. Next, we've got Damien at the BBC.
Mr. Streeting, Damien Grammaticus from the BBC. Can I just ask to follow up from that? You say you'll be standing. This week, we haven't seen evidence that you have the 81 MPs to back you to stand, do you? And you have also said that you want to, here today, you've got a big round of applause, saying you want to unite the movement to defeat reform. Isn't what you've done this week, and what you would do if you stand and there's a contest, show up the divisions, have weeks and weeks of Labour fighting just on display for the country?
No, I don't think that's the case. Look, firstly, I do have support in the parliamentary party, but this week I also had a choice. We could have rushed straight into a leadership contest, knowing not all of the candidates would be on the pitch, that Andy Burnham was about to stand in a by-election, and that if we had rushed ahead without giving Andy a chance to stand, the new leader, whether it was me or anyone else, would lack the legitimacy, and so we would end up extending instability and uncertainty. That might have been the self-interested thing to do for candidates who are in Parliament presently, but it wasn't in the party's interest and wasn't in the national interest. If you think you're good enough to do the top job, if you think you've got the right ideas for the country, you should be prepared to put them forward, test them against other competitors, and win an election. And that was the choice that I made. I also had a second choice. Some very principled and brave ministers resigned this week from government because the private messages that have been conveyed to the Prime Minister about the loss of confidence have not been heeded. Not all of them support me, but I pay tribute to all of them. I had another choice this week. Do I pull more ministers out of the government and cause more disruption, or do we do this in the right way, ask the Prime Minister to set out a proper leadership timetable and give his ministers the freedom to nominate whoever they want to see as leader of our party and the Prime Minister of our country? That's what I think he should still do. And the third challenge is, does this debate mean that we're helping reform rather than beating reform? I think the voters have sent us a really clear message. And I think it would be good for the Labour Party to show that we've noticed. I think we would be showing respect to brilliant Labour people who lost through no fault of their own. But most importantly of all, I think we'd be showing respect to the country. And if we carry on as we are, if we just say we're on the right course, we just need to go a bit faster, there is no virtue, no principle in going a bit faster off the same cliff. We need to change course. That's not about which personality do you want. It is about which platform, which set of ideas. What's the programme for the country, not just now but into the future. That's the battle I want to see, a battle of ideas. If we get this right, if we conduct ourselves in the right way, if the Prime Minister does the right and responsible thing by his party and his country, then I think the Labour Party will emerge stronger from this, more united, because we'll have had a proper debate, thrashed out the battle of ideas, and then come together, because nothing unites us more than wanting to deliver social justice in this country and beat the politics of Nigel Farage and reform.
Thank you. Now we're going to take questions from the audience. Rounds of 3, I think. So if you want to go here. Yeah, so in the blue shirt. I think you've got a mic coming.
Perfect, thanks. In a constituency that I was campaigning in, Calder Valley, we've just seen the council go over to reform. And a lot of those people in the north will be thinking about backing Burnham over yourself. What would be your message to them?
And then I'll do rounds 3. Next week. Yeah, just here with a scarf.
Thank you. Wes, you spoke about the role of technology and how it's undermining our democracy. Many people feel very scared about its role in the future of work. There's an opportunity, I think, for government to play a much more significant role in backing AI and technology businesses that can build great jobs rather than take them away from people. Are you prepared to see a government that's bold enough to really do that?
And then, yeah, just here in the Navy.
Thanks, Wes, for a very inspiring speech. It seems to me like a lot of the problem has been a Prime Minister starting to deliver results but failing to win the hearts and minds of the country. In the same way with the NHS, thank you for starting to deliver results and improvement, but at times it seemed like you've failed to win the hearts and minds of my colleagues in medical and nursing professions. Can you reassure us that you can win the hearts and minds of the country at large?
Over to you.
Yeah, let me take those in turn. Look, firstly, what would I say to voters who like Andy Burnham? Vote for him. Vote for him in Makerfield, especially. But look, throughout what I hope will be a good-natured contest focused on ideas, I'm not going to talk down people in the party who are my friends and colleagues. I think Andy Burnham has great strengths. I think he's been a strong mayor of Greater Manchester. I've enjoyed working with him as the Health Secretary. He's my immediate Labour predecessor. The tragedy is there was such an enormous gap between the two of us, and we don't want to create another enormous gap between Labour office holders. We've got to make sure that we deliver the change that people wanted to see, that we go into the next election with an equally bold and ambitious plan, and that as we go into the next election, and to the point of hearts and minds, what do we want people to feel when they're going into the ballot box ultimately? We want them to feel like Britain is moving in the right direction. We want them to feel that they've started to see things improving, whether that's NHS waiting lists falling, whether that's the provision at their local school, whether it's feeling a bit better off in their pockets. Those things are hard in the current backdrop, and nothing grinds my gears more than when we see record falls in NHS waiting lists, a pace we haven't seen since 2008, and people say it's really easy. It has not felt like that for the last 2 years. Change is hard, and if it's not hard, it's probably not worth doing. To the second point, Rachel's question there about technology, I think this issue of the impact on the labour market is one of the biggest challenges of our time, and this is why Labour is the answer to the big challenge of that time. Whether it's the just transition needed in this technological revolution, whether it's the just transition that's needed from fossil fuels to clean power, whether it is a just transition from the old world to the new world that we're going to be living in, Labour has always, by definition, at its best, had its eyes on the interests of the working man and woman, the many, not just the privileged few. And if we don't shape these revolutions in the right way, then we will see more power, more wealth, more opportunity hoarded. We need to make sure they're available to everyone. This is our responsibility. This is our answer. And in answer to one of the Guardian columnists today who said, look, I want to hear in this contest, like, what's the point of Labour? Why is Labour the answer versus maybe other progressive parties, or even, if you're a floating voter, a party on the right? Well, this is why. It is about fairness, equity, justice, and making sure that as the world changes, that the majority are benefiting, that there's opportunity and security for everyone, not just a privileged few. And the final point, hearts and minds. Look, I'm proud of what I've delivered as Health and Social Care Secretary in the last couple of years, and the hardest part of this week has been the wrench of leaving a job I absolutely loved when I really believed we were making progress. I'm really proud of it. I'm not going to pretend that amidst my many achievements, a love-in with the BMA was among them. I'm not sure who will be pleased not to be in the room most with the other in the resident doctor's dispute. But just to say that, you know, I think the challenge we've had with the BMA more than anything else is the recognition that with something as large as the health service, but it applies more broadly to society as a whole, there are choices and trade-offs. We inherited a country that's in an enormous mess. The challenges in some ways are getting harder, not easier, because of the war in Iran. And the way you make progress, the way you improve things, especially in the NHS, but applies to other challenges, is through a rising tide that lifts all ships, improving the whole system. And actually what I had to do often as health secretary was to try and stop being dragged off course in one direction by one particular pressure group or interest over another, because if I had just prioritised doctors over nurses, for example, that would be unfair and impractical. If I just focused on improving GPs and let NHS waiting lists rise, we still wouldn't be fixing the NHS. So you do have to be honest about choices and trade-offs, and I felt that what went wrong with the BMA was an unrealism, that having had a 28.9% pay rise, that the government could afford to do much more quickly for them, when frankly we hadn't moved as quickly or indeed as generously for many, many NHS workers who at the height of their career earnings will never be paid as much as the lowest doctor. So in government, you can't just say yes, sometimes you have to say no. And I think that, going back to my Ilford North leaflets, you may not always agree with me, but you'll always know where I stand. And here's the final thing I'd say on the subject of Ilford North, which has been a matter of much speculation since the last general election. At the last general election, I did my bit for the party and the country, and I went around campaigning all over the place to make sure that we got the majority that we needed. And we had a very difficult election in my own backyard with the Gaza independents. And they came for me the other week with a very personal campaign that was directed at me and was effectively the warm-up for the next general election. And I'm delighted to report that despite the terrible results we saw across the rest of the country, in Ilford North, the net loss of councillors was 3. I started with 22. I lost 3 in total, 4 to the independents, 1 to Reform, and I gained 2 from the Tories. I know how to win. I know how to win whether our opponents position themselves to our right or whether they position themselves to our left. And my warning to the party is don't get dragged off by the siren voices who say to win the next general election we need to try and out-reform Reform or out-green the Greens. We will win the next general election by being Labour. That's how we'll win.
Thank you. We'll take another round just here in the blue blazer.
Thank you. Louisa Dollamore from the Good Growth Foundation. You spoke about how we can challenge the politics of reform. And we saw last week in the surge of the Greens and Reform that populists are banging on our door. But we know from our research that one thing that unites those voters is financial insecurity. And we also know that the impact of financial insecurity that they feel is that they've had their choices taken away from them. So, you know, we talk a lot about how hard voters have had it, and that's absolutely true. But we also have to talk about how we can give people agency back in their lives so they once again feel like if they work hard, they'll get on. So that they once again feel like the choices they make will shape the future that they have. So my question to you would be, how can we give people back choice and agency in their lives? Thank you.
Yeah, just here in the green blazer.
Thanks, Finn. So we've obviously seen quite a few more hyper NIMBY parties win in London. We have to deliver 1.5 million homes. Not just for us, but for our future. How are we going to do that when now it's going to be even harder and local plans are going under more scrutiny?
Yeah, and final one just here at the front, the blue tie.
Hi, thank you. I think everyone in this room really appreciated what you had to say about Europe. As a young person, it is incredibly difficult to have that opportunity taken from us to be part of that union. Just on the logistics, would you commit to planning a second referendum in the R28 manifesto? How would you want to go about that? Thank you.
Yeah, let me take them in reverse order. Look, first of all, I think we need to be ambitious in charting out a new special relationship with the European Union, and we should go into discussions with our friends in Brussels and across other EU member states with that body language in mind, with that ambition and with that intention. We do have to respect the fact that we left the European Union through a democratic choice that took place not just in the referendum, but in the elections that followed. So we will need to, in future manifestos, seek a new mandate. I'm not proposing that we break the manifesto that we stood on at the last general election, because frankly, trust in politics and politicians is in even shorter supply than money in our country. Last time I checked, we're a little bit more unpopular than traffic wardens and estate agents. So I don't think that people will thank us if we break our promises, but we should be ambitious in building what the future could look like and set that out to voters in our manifesto at the next general election. And then to the other two questions are linked in a way, because they both speak to vested interests. And they both speak to a fundamental question in politics about how power is exercised and in whose interests. So one of the things that I was proud of with our agenda in health was it wasn't just about improving the service and improving the morale of staff. It was fundamentally about giving more power, more ease, more convenience, more choice and control to patients, power to the patient. And I want to see that running through our public service reform agenda like a golden thread. We can't deliver public services without brilliant public servants, and we need to invest in them, their leadership, their training. We need to give them more agency. I'm also in favour of freedom to the front line. But the Labour Party should never forget that there are always producer interests and user interests. We should always be on the side of the user fundamentally. Public services are there to serve the public, not the providers. Which brings me to the question on housing, which I will have a lot to say about, I suspect, during the course of this campaign. Chris Curtis is here somewhere. There, where is he? There he is, he's at the back. You will have heard him earlier today. He's always doing his stuff on growth and YIMBYism, and frankly, if every council in the country was building homes as quickly as Milton Keynes, we wouldn't have a problem meeting our housing targets. But we wouldn't. But we're not, and we wouldn't meet our housing targets if we carry on like this. So I think we do need to think seriously about how we can build more homes more quickly, and not just affordable homes in inverted commas, genuinely affordable homes, and social housing, good quality social housing. But we will only be able to do that if we take on some vested interests. And look, I love the natural environment as much as anyone, I really do. But the species I'm most worried about in this country at the moment are children living in mouldy bed and breakfast. They're the people I'm most worried about. And we've also got to deliver big infrastructure in this country. And we've got to go a lot more quickly. I think, you know, I've been a member of the government for the last couple of years. I served in opposition on the front bench the whole time. I'm proud of so much of what we've done. I don't want people to be under any illusions about that. But sometimes, if I could kind of sum up the challenge in one word, it's like dosage. It's like we're doing a lot of the right things, but loads and loads of little right things. And actually, we need to just pick a few big things and get them right. And if we're not building homes for the next generation, then we're failing the next generation.
Yeah, Wes, powerful speech. You might have wanted to make that speech for some time, I sense. How do we avoid the public thinking that we can have annual leadership contests? How do we avoid people thinking that the Prime Minister can just be replaced if they just go out and send a message to number 10? That's why a number of us lost last week. We want to see a Premier who can actually govern for a decent period of time with a party and an electorate which is happy, whether it's you or somebody who wants to stand in Makerfield. How do we get that message over to the public that this is an election to actually guarantee years as a Premier and not just waiting for another media campaign and social media campaign and local election setback, which takes us back to zero? Thank you very much.
I'll do just here on the side of the brown top.
Hi, one really good speech. Oh, should I stand up? I just was wondering about a question about the Prime Minister, and if he was to step down and set out a timetable, how do you think, should he be a part of your cabinet or should he be a backbencher? How would you want Keir to dignifiedly step back, and what role could he play in anyone's future government?
And I will take the final question. Yes, just here in the denim.
There is a world where we might not win Makerfield, and this, like, we're waiting for best players on the pitch, which I'm still a bit sceptical of with Andy. What do we do if that world happens? Like, who's pulling the starting gun effectively?
Let me take them in reverse order. I think. Look, first of all, we've got to be in it to win it in Makerfield. I know there'll be differences of opinion about whether it was right for Josh Simons to vacate the seat in the way that he did. It's a hell of a risk, but I honestly think that if anyone can win that by-election, Andy Burnham can. And I'll be out there door knocking day after day to help get him elected. I hope all of you will too. I love a by-election. I wish we didn't have so many of them. And I'll be proud to campaign for Andy Burnham. As to Keir Starmer, I'm not going to speculate on his future. I would just say, whatever the disagreements that I have, and however strongly I felt about those disagreements, to the extent I had to leave his government and call for change in leadership, I wouldn't want anyone to think for a moment that I do not think he has many remarkable qualities, that he is someone of enormous decency and someone that I respect on a great many levels. And whatever the coming weeks and months hold, we should never forget that at the last general election, he led us to victory that in 2019 people thought was impossible. And I really mean that quite sincerely. And the final question, where was the final question? You have to remind me of the final question. Oh, and that's Neil's question. Look, I do think that we operate in a hostile media environment. I do think we want to avoid changing your Prime Minister, becoming an annual or an every other year sport in this country. I don't think it is a good thing, and that is why I've genuinely wrestled before saying what I've said. And I wish that there'd been a different way. I think the way that we ensure stability, the way in which we build greater trust and confidence in our politics, the way in which Labour can win the next general election is by having vision, having direction, having a clear plan, having a strong and united team, drawing on the best people we've got across our different traditions, our best ideas, making better use of the entire parliamentary party, making better use of our leaders in local government, making better use of our party activists, making better use of our partners in the trade unions who anchor us in the workplace. We have got so many strengths. We can be better than this. There are many things that we've done in the last couple of years that I'm proud of and you're proud of. The tragedy is, to the average voter, they can list our mistakes far more readily than they can list our achievements. So we've got one shot at this. We have to get it right. The stakes are high, but the opportunity is enormous. We said we'd change this country. We still can. We said we would build a fairer future for Britain. We still can. We know we have to unite progressives and smash reform. We still can, and we will. Thank you.
Delegates, please stay in your seats. We have the last and final set of breakout sessions. If you would like to start making your way to those sessions. In this room, we have It's Complicated, the UK-EU relationship. In Bonn Hub, more United